For decades, one thinker, Timothy Holborn, has been quietly architecting a blueprint for a fairer digital world, one where our contributions, our ideas, are actually valued. So today, let's dive into his vision for reclaiming our digital value.
Think about it for a second. Every single time you post something, create a piece of content, or even just share an idea online, you're generating value. But who actually profits from all that effort, right? That's the huge question we're digging into today.
So, here's how we're going to break this all down. First, we need to define the problem, and we'll do that using a pretty provocative term: digital slavery. Then we'll look at the big solution, a kind of bank for our ideas. From there, we'll check out the actual building blocks that make this possible, see the new human-centric model it creates, and finally talk about why reclaiming our digital value, why it matters so much.
All right, first up, let's get right into the problem. And to really get it, we have to understand what kind of value is actually at stake here. The key concept, the absolute heart of all this, is something called knowledge capital. Now, we're not just talking about physical stuff you can hold. This is your ideas, your data, your art, all those unique digital things you create. In our economy, this intangible stuff, it's the real currency. It's what drives enormous value.
And that brings us to Holborn's term, digital slavery. What does he mean by that? Well, it's a system where we, the creators, are basically cut off from the value of our own knowledge capital. Our creativity becomes the very first link in these huge digital supply chains, but it's an uncompensated one. The big tech giants just scoop up all that value, usually through some terms of service we all agree on without a second thought. Our creativity effectively becomes their free labor.
And this quote right here, it really hits the nail on the head. Holborn is arguing that our knowledge capital isn't just free content for platforms to use and abuse. No, it's a tool of trade, and it should be protected from being unlawfully taken or exploited. This is really about setting up some basic fundamental rights for the digital world we all live in. Okay, so if that's the problem, what on earth is the solution? For Holborn, the answer started coming together way back in the year 2000 with this concept he called knowledge banking. The idea is actually pretty simple to grasp. Just imagine a bank, but instead of storing your money, it stores, it manages, and it lets you transact with your intellectual property, your knowledge capital. And the best part? It's all based on a permission system that you and only you control. You see, this whole concept builds a completely different kind of web. The internet we have now is built on copying stuff, right? Platforms duplicate your data and store it on their servers. But a knowledge banking system, it's built on linking. Your data stays yours, and you grant access through direct agreements. This just fundamentally flips the script on how value flows, directing it back to you, the actual creator. Of course, a huge vision like this is, just a dream, unless you have the right tools to build it. So the next step was this long, really patient process of helping to create the foundational technologies to make it all a reality. Yeah, this wasn't built overnight. It started way back in 2000, and Holborn's work eventually led to him collaborating with the World Wide Web Consortium, the W3C. These are the folks who set the standards for the entire web. And together, they developed these open standards for something called verifiable credentials and web payments. Now, this is the revolutionary part. These aren't proprietary products owned by one company. They are open global standards that anyone can use. It's true public infrastructure. So these are basically the three pillars for this new web. Verifiable credentials. Think of it like a digital passport for your skills and your work. It's a super secure way to prove who you are or what you've contributed without having to rely on some big company. Then you have web payments, which are open, royalty-free ways to send and receive money. This opens the door for awesome things like micropayments for content. And the whole thing is guided by this human-centric design idea, making sure that technology actually serves us, the individuals, not the corporations. So we've got the big idea, and now we have the tools. But what does it actually look like when you put it all together? Well, it creates this totally new human-centric way for us to create and work together online. I mean, the difference is just night and day. In the platform-centric web we live in now, the platform is the center of everything. It captures all the value, your data, you're the product. But in a human-centric web, the individual is the center. You control your own data, and the value flows directly to you and the people you work with.
Okay, so check this out. This diagram really lays it all out beautifully. You've got Tom, who has an idea. Then Frank comes in and makes some graphics. Lucy writes the code. As more and more people contribute, their work gets validated and it's linked to the project, creating this awesome, decentralized, collaborative network. And right here, this is the magic. The final product gets released with a certificate that tracks every single contribution. So when that project starts earning money, the revenue is automatically split and distributed to everyone who helped make it happen. This system makes sure those obligation costs, the real-world costs of people's time, their labor, their creativity, are actually paid back to them. No big central company taking a huge cut or just owning everybody's work. All right, let's wrap this up and look at the big picture. Why is this decades-long effort to rebuild the web's foundations from the ground up so incredibly important?
Holborn uses this fantastic analogy that I love. Think about a public library. The workers who build it, they all get paid for their labor, right? Those payments cover the obligation cost of creating the building. But the workers don't then own the library or stand at the door charging a fee. It becomes a public good for everyone. The exact same principle can apply online. Pay creators fairly for their work, and then that work can become a public good, freely available to all of us.
So here's the bottom line. Your ideas, your creations, your data, your knowledge capital, it all has real inherent value. The system we have now, well, it often amounts to a form of digital slavery, exploiting that value. But a different way isn't just possible, it's actually being built on these open, human-centric standards that can make sure creators finally get paid fairly for what they contribute. And that really leaves us with one last critical question. We now know that the open standards and the basic tools for a much fairer web already exist. They're out there. So the real question isn't whether we can build a more equitable web, it's whether we will. What do you think is holding us back?